Welcome back, viewers, to another episode of Environmental History Worth Reading, our monthly look at what's good in environmental history on the web,
hmm
audio, video, text, and I'm joined by Jessica.
I'm Jessica DeWitt, and I'm the social media editor for Niche.
So, Jessica, you've picked 5 picks of different articles related to environmental history that you saw shared on social media this month. And we start
Mhm.
with an investigative report by the Toronto Star on mercury environmental contamination at Grassy Narrows First Nation.
Yes, and if people follow Environmental History Worth Reading, they know last month I covered a lot of environmental justice pieces, and this one fits nicely in with those. And basically, the Star reporters traveled up to Dryden, Ontario, and they looked at the soil behind an old paper mill
Mm.
and measured it for contaminants. Uh, Apparently the Ontario government does not acknowledge that this is probably the source of mercury contamination for
Mm.
grassy narrows. And so basically they're just looking at what is actually in the soil, and scientists are saying that it shows that it's likely industrial contamination. And they give a little bit of background on the mill. Between 1962 and 1970, it supposedly dumped 10 tons of mercury into a stream. And they talked to a retired mill worker who remembers dumping mercury into a mill pond. So basically, there's a disconnect between what people are saying and what the government is saying. So.
And this is a long-standing environmental
Mhm.
justice issue in Ontario for sure. And students of Canadian environmental history would be familiar with the case study of Grassy Narrows, which
Mhm.
is ongoing conflict with the province over this. Well, we stay with the theme of water and rivers and streams and look at Hamilton's ghost rivers and the changing
Mhm.
waterfront of Hamilton.
This is most popular post on Facebook this past month,
Oh, cool.
and people really liked it. And it begins with showing a map from 1909 of Hamilton's shore
Hmm.
and looking at how it has dramatically changed in the last 100 years. This isn't unique to Hamilton, of course. Many cities have been built on filled-in land and also have had their waterways diverted through the years. So it just looks at that. And what I find interesting about the article is that it mainly postures it as a problem for development. It's kind of
Hmm.
just an annoyance for them because they have to deal with these hidden waterways underneath the city. So they present the history, but also look at the way it's hindering development. So I just thought that was a interesting way to go about things.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of other articles about this for different cities, ways in which to represent or recover these lost creeks and streams. But this was a different angle of
Yes.
how you develop new buildings, particularly condominiums, on infilled land.
hmm
Over at the National Council on Public History, you've picked a post about representing climate change through the coastal national parks.
Yes, this is by Jackie Gonzalez, and she's an interpreter at Cape Cod National Seashore. So she's looking at it from a public history point of view, and she argues that as an interpreter, it's the interpreter's job to show the public the stories that interconnect with the environmental change.
Hmm.
And she's saying that she gives a lot of examples from Cape Cod as well as other seashores about how the human stories and the climate change stories are pretty much all around. You just have to open your eyes and point them out for people. So it gives a lot of interesting examples, and I think is a pretty concrete way of how environmental history interconnects with tourism and public history. So,
Yeah, and a great argument too she makes about, the ability to think about climate stories in all the national parks and
mhm,
to use the national parks as, I guess, laboratories or classrooms for educating the public about environmental change.
exactly.
We've got some reflections on the loss of the Pioneer Cabin, the giant sequoia that was taken down last month. And we're looking at an article here written by Sarah Ruth Wilson on her website.
Yes. So the felling of Pioneer Cabin by a big storm in early January was a major story across the internet, etc. And Wilson is just she's looking at she's exploring why this tree toppling, this tree that has a gigantic hole in it, so it's obvious it's weakened, right? Why
Hmm.
were we so emotionally attached to this tree? Why did it cause emotional reaction? Um, and I just really, of all the posts that I read, I enjoyed this one the most. So she's talking about how we understand history through place. And she argues that the tree has significance on a natural history level in that it connects us to an ancient past,
Hmm.
and also a social history level because so many tourists have gone to that exact spot and taken so many pictures, etc., that we connect to it on that level. She also makes some salient points about the current political climate and why we might be hanging on to a symbol like that more closely. Um, and just makes some interesting points about violence and argues that the loss is poignant, but it's not really sad because to make it sad is to argue that the tree only exists for to make us feel good,
Hmm.
when actually it when it's natural course and it's okay that it's gone.
Yeah, this story was extremely familiar for me, having written about Stanley Park and the cultural and emotional attachments to the trees in that park, and the hollow tree, which is not as big as this hollowed out sequoia, but the same phenomenon. This was common across the Pacific Northwest in North America, of
Mhm.
taking gargantuan trees that are either already hollow or hollowing them out to demonstrate how massive they are. So there
Mhm.
used to be sequoias that people would cut into stumps to build dance floors on, and you'd
Yes.
dance on the top of it. So this is yet another one. So I get, one of the interesting things about this case study that stood out to me was the forgetting. This is not the first of the giant sequoias that's
Mhm.
fallen that
Yes.
Americans and Canadians have had emotional attachments to. Great piece by
Mhm.
Sarah here. The last pick is another one of these syllabi for
Mhm.
contextualizing a contemporary issue. This one appears over at Edge Effects, and it's about energy policy.
Yes, so Brian Hamilton and Rachel Gross at Edge Effects are writing in response to the Trump administration's America First energy plan. So they are playing off of the current trend to make these accessible syllabi available to the public, to
Hmm.
anyone who wants to use them. And they argue, I think it's a pretty obvious point, but that you cannot understand current climate and energy debates without looking at them historically. So it's just a great list of resources. They have, I think, 5 units, including energy and the making of modern America. They have one on clean coal. They have one on regulation, etc. So I think just a great resource to take a look at.
Yeah, it's really well put together.
Mhm.
Tons of great resources, links out to all of the sources that they cite, as well as good
Mhm.
visuals, maps, and charts included. This is a pretty comprehensive one, and great to see more of that happening out there.
Yes.
Well, Jessica, you'll keep your eyes out, your peepers peeled for what shows up next month. And viewers, we hope to see you back here at Environmental History Worth Reading. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Sean.